Friends, when lockdown began and we realized that our lives were going to be radically different than they were before, our family were sitting together on one of the first Friday nights for dinner, and we started to think to ourselves, what would we do? How would we utilize our time to ensure that we came out of lockdown as better people than when we had gone in? And therefore we went around the table, each of us thinking of some new skill, some initiative, something that we've wanted to do for quite a while. And now we're going to seize the opportunity, take advantage, and really utilize this hopefully once in many lifetimes unusual circumstance. And we went around the table, and just to mention a few of the suggestions that were made, Reuven said he'd like to learn guitar. Yehuda, he said that he would be interested in the street performance known as parkour to learn how to do some of the skills, some of the moves. I, as a spiritual leader of the family, said I would be delighted to learn how to brew beer. Well, I can tell you, as time has moved on since that original conversation, Reuven is well on his way to playing guitar with mastery. Yehuda's bouncing off the walls, doing his best to mimic some of the YouTube moves that he has seen. I myself, however, are more on the consuming end of the beer industry than on the production line. You see, with all the plans in the world, things did not turn out exactly how any of us really anticipated, with the pulls on our times being in many ways different than what we would have expected, and perhaps just being able to have somewhat well-being, peace of mind is itself a luxury under these circumstances. But I can say, although I may have failed in certain pursuits during lockdown, in one area I have managed to capitalize. For those who are aware, Feldmans are readers. We absolutely devour books. It doesn't matter the genre. As long as it's well written, Feldmans want to read it. And because of the long Shabbat days and then through the week as well, I was able to reinvest and replunge into my absolute and most wonderful passion for reading. And the most recent book which I have taken up is a brilliant biography of the 16th president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Now, Abraham Lincoln, a book which I recommend is read by all who can, is a unique insight into the strains and challenges of leadership, specifically under crisis. But it's not to the life of Lincoln which I want to make a connection to Shavuot, but rather instead to the death of Abraham Lincoln, which I feel connects deeply not only to Shavuot, but also deeply as well to the times that we live in and the dilemmas that we face as Jewish people throughout time, and specifically continuing on to today as well. Friends, like in 1865, during the time when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, also Shavuot, like today, was not the most well-kept of all of the Jewish holidays. It didn't have the same glamour and appeal to the general population to flood the shul with mass attendance as the law is read and the recitation, like it was just done recently, moments ago, by David Kosky of the Ten Commandments of the Receiving the Torah. But just like now, those committed, those connected, certainly did come to shul during those years, as we do today, with the flowers adorning our beautiful synagogues and celebrating the Chag, which is Matan Torateinu, the receiving of the Torah. However, there was to be a particular conflict on the June the 1st, 1865. You see, not many weeks before that, Abraham Lincoln, as he was attending Ford's Theater, was assassinated on the 14th of April. And not very long afterwards, President Andrew Johnson declared there to be a day which would be a day of mourning and humiliation as the country thought about what it meant to have lost such a great president and such a great leader. He called upon the citizens of the nation to go forth and gather in their respective places of worship to lament the late president's tragic demise. But the day that he chose was the 1st of June, 1865, the same day of Shavuot, in which there was a call from the then president to go into the places of worship, to lament and to cry, to weep and to mourn and to reflect on the loss. But can we see the great dilemma that American Jewry found itself in, and how to respond to this public day of mourning? Certainly at that time, there was not going to be the option of turning to government and saying, listen, unfortunately, your day of mourning clashes with our day of festival. Can you please move it to a more appropriate time? That wasn't going to happen. Nor, thank God, for all those who were serious about Jewish practice, to say maybe we'll postpone Shavuot to a more appropriate, opportune time when we won't have any conflicts with public mourning. Instead, the great minds of the time, the Jewish political activists, the leaders, and the rabbis, put their heads together to try to determine what in the world are we going to do with this clash. And two approaches emerged to handle this dilemma. Two different schools of thought. Two approaches which in many ways are still used as models for how we approach a place in the world as a Jewish person, but also a modern member of society. You see, there's a stark question. How does a Jew balance loyalty to faith versus loyalty to nation? Piety or presence as part of a more larger people? And the two schools, the two approaches that were developed can be summed up as follows. Do we go with compliance or do we go with conviction? Compliance certainly had its adherents. One of them was the great Rabbi Sabato Marassis of the Philadelphia's oldest synagogue, Mikvah Yisrael. Marassis said to his community that we must, Hebrews of America, observe the National Day of Mourning and Humiliation without any reservation. He said, repress the joyful emotions that thrill your hearts. And although we must have unswerving fidelity to the laws of Sinai, and although great is our joy in the day, but it still must be very incomplete by reason of the dear objects so suddenly borne away from our earthly vision. He said that religious communities could best serve the public square by complying with the broader American civic spirit, and in that way forge a single righteous collective in which the diverse multitudes of the country could come together in responsible unity, bettering themselves and the country as a whole. That, my friends, was the approach of compliance. There was another approach as well, though, and that was the approach of conviction. Conviction, with one of its spokespeople, Jacques Judah Lyons, the rabbi of the New York community congregation She'eras Yisrael. He too was a patriot. He too was greatly shaken by the loss of Lincoln. But he said, instead of mourning, the rules of our ritual of Shavuot prohibit every demonstration of sorrow and all supplicatory invocations on this day of joy. But for this restriction, we too, in common with our fellow citizens of all denominations, would have observed this day of humiliation, but we cannot, for it's a festival. It's the day of Shavuot. And on Shavuot, we are commanded to have joy, and we cannot partake in the mourning and humiliation of the nation. Jacques did, though, find a means of incorporating the loss of Lincoln into the service on that day. You see, it wasn't the first day of Shavuot, but rather the second day of Shavuot, of which the 1st of June fell. And therefore, standing up at the pulpit, Rabbi Lyons turned to the community and he said, "It is our practice to recite Yizkor today for the loss of our dearly beloved lost family members. And although Yizkor is typically reserved only for Jewish people, it does seem to be extremely appropriate and fitting that in our prayers and supplications that our dearly beloved will have their everlasting eternal rest in heaven, we include Abraham Lincoln as well, that may the president also, for all of his goodness which he brought to humanity, have his eternal rest in heaven and to be at peace as well." Compliance versus conviction. And as we are here together across the pond and over 150 years into the future, can we agree that that same dilemma, perhaps in different guises and in different shapes, is still very much a question that we can resonate with as we think about our identity as British Jewry, with fidelity to Queen and country, proud, open-minded, modern men and women who think of ourselves as part of society. How do we identify with who we are? How do we handle the questions that come up day in and day out of compliance versus conviction? In truth, this is probably not a question that any of us can articulate a firm answer on. But I do think that the fact that we continue to ask that question is a very special part of what it means to be a Jewish person. And although we cannot swear to know exactly where we have that line of compliance versus conviction. As we go into the Chag of Shavuot, the time when we all stood at Mount Sinai, receiving the word of Hashem, one thing we do know is that most certainly his conviction is very much still with us. And as we consider ourselves to be the links in the chain from those who have come before us to the future, please God, generations as well, we know that the conviction that Hashem has, the faith in us, is something that is deep in our hearts, that we have been handed and we will, please God, continue to hand down as well. And that the conviction of knowing where we've come from and where we're going will inspire us as, please God, we move from a period of time of being separated to being together as well. Please God, let us use the time of Shavuot, the time of incredible joy, to reaffirm our identities of who we are and what we believe. And as we celebrate through Torah, through festive foods, and through knowing that we as a community are very much together, we should all be blessed with good health, with wellness, with security, with peace of mind, and please God, the ability to go forward stronger, more beloved together for a beautiful period ahead. And wish you all Chag Sameach, and please God, Shabbat Shalom.